All right, our speaker today is someone who's very well known to this congregation, and we're so glad he's our spiritual leader. But he had a life before he came to Unity Five Cities. As some of you know, he was the pastor at the Santa Maria Church. And I always like to remind him that he then chose to retire, or so he thought. And then I don't know, Spirit came knocking on his door and said, "We've got a place for you." And his place is now here. And we love it when he is here doing his MC thing, but we especially love it when he shares a lesson. So please welcome Reverend Brian Walker today.
How are we doing now? Okay. Standing here, I'm reminded when I was in ministerial school, we had this really beautiful fellow who periodically he would get up and stand up. He sat in one corner of the room, right in the front, and he would stand up and look out on everybody and say, "I love everybody in this room." So, in honor of Lancey, his name was Lance. He was affectionately known to us as Lancey. And I'm a little bit emotional because he had a terrible biking accident and he passed at a young age. But anyway, so in honor of Lancey, I say, I love everybody in this room and everybody on Zoom. So, all right, so the theme for this month is empowerment. So as I'm wont to do, I usually go to the dictionary and find out what that means. And so what it means is authority or power given to someone to do something. Authority or power given to someone to do something. And I want to remind you that we have that idea right in our mission, Unity Five Cities mission statement, which goes like this. We are a heart-centered spiritual community dedicated to empowering personal growth and living the unlimited possibilities of spirit. Can I get an amen out there? Amen. Thank you. Yeah. So I want to start by telling you a little story. This is by Jack Kornfield, who we just had a little reading from. But I'm sure it's a name that many of you are familiar with. He's a Buddhist teacher, he's an author, he's written a number of books, and he's the founder of, or co-founder of Spirit Rock Meditation Center up in Northern California. Anyway, Jack tells a story. He writes about a story of a woman named Jean who had come to see him in a greatly confused state. She'd been married to a doctor and they had a couple of children, and her husband was prone to having bouts of depression. And during an episode of depression in the previous year, he had committed suicide. And so needless to say, this was a real tragedy for the family, and they were, trying to put all the pieces back together. Now, when he was alive, the family went and did spiritual practice at different mystical communities in this area in Massachusetts where they live. But they went to the community, the Tibetan Buddhist community, and the Sufi community, the mystical Christian community. And so when this terrible thing happened, each of those communities sent representatives to support the family, to bring them food, to look after the children, to just give them whatever emotional support that they could. And so one day, a close friend from the Tibetan community came over excitedly to Jean and said, I've been doing Tibetan prayers and visualizations to the dead for the past 40 days. Last night, and I saw him. I saw your husband. He's entering the bardo of light, and he's being escorted by a bodhisattva. He says, I could sense this so clearly, I feel certain that it's true. And so she felt, she was glad to get this message, and so she felt some relief about that. But a couple of days later, she was in town and she ran across a friend from the Christian community who said, I've been doing some meditation practice and he's fine. I've seen him. He in my prayer and meditation that he's surrounded by white light in the heaven of the ascended masters. Now, this was a little bit disconcerting to her because, that was a little different one than what she'd heard before. So she was going to go by and see somebody who was in the Sufi community who was a respected teacher for a long time. And before she could tell her or tell him her dilemma, he announced to her, "Your husband is fine, He has already entered a womb and will be born in a female body in the area of Washington, D.C." Well, this was not what she wanted to hear. So she went to Jack Kornfield and very confused and was trying to make sense out of all of this. And so Jack just said, can you put aside, the Tibetan teachings, the Sufi teachings, the Christian mystical teachings, and can you just look into your heart and what is the truth that you know? And he reminded her that it might be quite simple. And so after a little period of silence, she said, I know that everything changes, and not much more than that. That everything is born, dies, everything in life is in the process of change. And so Jack writes, he said, can you just live from that truth? Just knowing that simple truth, can that be enough for you to live a wise and spiritual life? And as she reflected on that, and as she kind of lived into that, she got her bearings, and she moved on, and she lived with that knowledge. So, we're all faced with these questions all the time. We go through life and it's kind of mysterious and we're trying to figure out, what's what and how do I behave and all of that stuff. How do we live our lives? So now in Buddhism, there's a well-known saying that goes like this, about being a lamp unto yourself. And this is actually a teaching of the Buddha. And so at the time that the Buddha was alive, there were many teachers, many yogis, sages, adepts, masters, all teaching different kinds of things, some of them contradictory. And there was a particular area called Kalamas, and they had a series of teachers come to them and do teachings to them, spiritual teachings, and there were many people in the village who were uncertain, kind of like Jean was, about hearing these different things that had happened to her husband. And so the Buddha, this is actually a teaching that the Buddha made just shortly after he got his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, okay? And so he was not well known. But I want to read to you what the scripture say about what the Buddha said. The Buddha said, "Do not believe me either. Do not believe me either. If you wish to know spiritual truth, you must investigate it this way. Do not be satisfied with hearsay or tradition, with legends or what is written in great scriptures, with conjecture or logic, but look in yourselves. When you know in yourselves what teachings are unprofitable, blameworthy, condemned by the wise when adopted and put into effect, lead to harm and suffering, if they lead to falsehood and greed, to the increase of hatred and delusion, you should abandon them. Only when you know in yourself when things are wholesome, blameless, condemned by the wise, and when adopted, practiced lead to welfare and happiness, loving kindness, clarity and freedom, then you must follow these." But I love the way he starts, and he says, don't believe me either. That's a confident guy. So, Jesus has a very similar kind of teaching. And in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. So, are you familiar with that saying? By their fruits, you'll know them. That's what Jesus taught on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount. And it's the same idea when we think about this metaphysically. There are all kinds of choices we can make in terms of who we should believe. Authorities and teachings and scriptures and belief systems, allowing them or choosing to make our choices on our behalf. And Jesus is saying, be careful, because some of those are not true. And not only will they lead you astray, they can be harmful. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing. But not to worry, because Jesus assures us in this passage, we can distinguish the true prophets from the false by knowing the fruits in our lives. Because whenever anybody tells you to look for the truth outside of yourself, that is not the direction to follow, but to know that through your own experience, you have the innate wisdom to know the truth for yourself. So if the result, that is the fruit, is personal empowerment, you can trust that that prophet, that teaching is true for you. So we just completed a class this week, and it was based on the book, Ask Yourself This, Questions to Open the Heart, Expand the Mind, and Awaken the Soul, by Wendy Craig Purcell, who's a Unity minister, who has a church in San Diego. I met Wendy. She's really terrific, has a wonderful church. And so the book is organized around chapters with themes that have a series of questions around these themes. And the theme in the first chapter is to grow spiritually. And the very first question in the book is, what do you know for sure? What do you know for sure? And so, I'm part of this class. And when it's my turn in the first class, I said, I know for sure that everything changes. And I had not talked to Jean. And so, people were given all kinds of answers. And I thought about it after that first week, and I'm thinking, I'm the minister. I should probably come up with something more than things change. And I felt a little embarrassed about that. So when we came back together the next week, I said, I want to add something. And what I said was, I know for sure that I have a profound relationship with the silence. And that's true. That I do. I've been practicing meditation for decades, twice a day. And I know for sure that when I make that connection, there is something that happens it's good. And I know it for sure. I remember 25 years ago when I found Unity in Santa Maria. And I started going to classes there on Saturday morning. PJ taught those classes, Pastor Jim. I know some of you have been around for a while and know PJ. And so after I had been there for a fairly short time, I became aware that, for people to think that reincarnation was true was just something matter of fact for them. Or when somebody in class said, it's not seeing is believing, but believing is seeing, everybody in the class thought that made perfect sense, except me, because that was not part of my worldview at that time. But when I say that I have a profound relationship with the silence, and you can put another word in there if you want to say God or the void or whatever suits your preference, I'm good with that. That's exactly what Unity teaches. That Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of Unity, taught that the silence is what they practiced every day, and that it is the basics, it's the foundation of all of Unity's teachings. But actually, as I get before you here this morning, I've thought about this some more, okay? So I have more I want to share with you. And so what I know for sure is that when I live with an open heart, that I accept things as they are, and I am much more able to be present to whatever is happening. That I'm just here, and that to me is really just kind of an expression of life. I know that when I live with an open heart, that I have more compassion for others and for myself, and that feeling that compassion, I want to help people, and I want to support people in whatever way is appropriate for them. And when I live with an open heart, what I know for sure is that I have this sense of awe about the universe, that it's an amazing, amazing place, and that I am grateful that I have this adventure in life and dealing with this mystery. It's who thought up this game? I mean, this is really, they're at the top of their game, I'm telling you. I mean, it is really an amazing, amazing world. And not only that, but there's a meaning to life, that it's not just random, and we're not here just because, the world is some sort of chaos and things are just popping in the popcorn and they just popped out the way. But there's an order in the universe, and that life is worth living, and that what I do matters. It makes a difference in an infinite universe that is expanding. Just one individual person on this little planet Earth, and it makes a difference to the universe somehow. And even if my head can't explain that, my heart says that that's true. So what do I mean when I say live with an open heart? This is an idea about living with an open or a closed heart that's very well developed in the Bible, in both the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament. And so there are different descriptions of how the heart can be. The heart can be shut. The heart can be proud. The heart can be fat. It's as if it's encrusted with something, so it's kind of out of touch. The heart can be hard. The heart can be made of stone. And so we can think about this metaphorically as it represents human life in a sense, and how we see the world. It represents a worldview, kind of a lens, so of how we make sense of the world and how we orient ourselves to our life's experience. And so as happens in every life, we have some sort of pain or some sort of suffering. We have disappointments, we have betrayals, we have health challenges, we have career setbacks, we have all sorts of stuff that happens to us. And so to close yourself off, to protect yourself for a time, to heal, and to so you can come back and kind of get back on the proverbial horse again is something that, can be essential for all of us to do at one time or another. But to do that in the long term, to make that a way through which you're going to live your life is, might be safe, but it affects all aspects of your life and your well-being, physically, emotionally, mentally, how you approach life, what you're willing to do, what you're willing to embrace and to take on, what risks you're willing to take. Your attitude toward life, about being here and what life means for you. All of these things are really, you look at through this filter that really damps down and creates a negative kind of place where you live your life in fear. And that's living life with a closed heart. When you live your life with an open heart, it's about having the ability and capacity and choosing to do the inner work when we have life setbacks, to heal, to grow, to forgive other people and ourselves, to be willing to take a risk, to being vulnerable, to being able to risk intimacy, to welcome and embrace all of life's joys and sorrows and the mystery that life is. For me, it means that even though I've been married twice and that those marriages didn't turn out the way I planned, and that was painful, that I can do it a third time. And I have. And it's fun. So, what I know when my heart is open, that growing spiritually isn't some kind of special knowledge that you need to have. It's not the result of reading sacred texts and going off on a mountain and doing all of these kinds of rituals and all that kind of stuff. Not that all of that stuff can't be very useful. But for me, it's about knowing that there's an abundant wisdom in the heart. And that when you get in touch with that, that's enough. That is enough. And the wisdom of the heart is here all the time, right now. Breathe with me. Just to be present, there's a wisdom in that. And there's a knowing that comes from deep within you that nobody can deny. Because you know that deep within your being. So the wholeness and the freedom that we all are seeking in this mystery of life is what we're seeking, is our true nature. Our true nature, who we really are. And so you can be a lamp unto yourself. So I want to bring you back to our vision statement. We are a heart-centered spiritual community dedicated to empowering personal growth and living the unlimited possibilities of spirit. Empowerment, authority or power given to someone to do something. So who has your authority? Who do you give that power to? Pope John the 23rd, who initiated the Second Vatican Council, for anybody who knows what that is, and who has recently been canonized a saint by our current Pope, Pope Francis. He writes that he would sometimes awaken at night and think about some serious problem and say, I've got to tell the Pope. But then he would waken up more completely and go and remember, oh, I am the Pope. And friends, that's the story of our lives. When you wake up and realize, I'm the Pope. I'm the Pope. But more than that, you are the expression of the Christ consciousness, the Buddha nature. You are the embodiment of the living God. So I invite you to ask yourself this question. What do I know for sure? What does my heart tell me about the truth of life? And when you answer that from the depth of your being, you are empowered to be a lamp unto yourself. God bless you, friends.